Hello, and welcome to this episode of Life After Scientology. My name is Ron Miscavige, and I'm glad you're tuning in to watch this. Let's get right into it. We have a guest with us today by the name of Gary Morehead. Gary is a friend of mine for decades. As a matter of fact, I've only known him as Jackson. That's his nickname. So I'll go back and forth between his real name and the nickname. And I'd like to welcome him to the program. And good morning, Jackson.
Good morning, Ronnie. Yeah, I mean, just for clarification, that I use Jackson when I'm trying to avoid my probation officer. So
okay. All right. Well, now everybody knows how you got the nickname. Right?
Oh,
yeah.
Man.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, Jackson has some interesting experiences to tell you about today, and I'd like to get right into it. So, first of all, how did you get in Scientology? Tell us that story.
Well, through my parents. I really just grew up in it. Out of the Orange County Tustin org back in the 60s and 70s. And then my mom was recruited for staff after my parents divorced, and I followed my mom in at the age of 12, going on 13.
Okay, so you actually grew up in Scientology. Well,
Yeah.
You actually, if you went in when you were 12, you kind of grew up in the Sea Org. Did you join the Sea Org right away, or I guess?
Yeah, right.
Were you out at the ranch? Tell us about that.
No, we went to Los Angeles, living out in a town, a diamond bar outside of LA County, and we were recruited from there. And I don't know how that recruiting arrangement fell into place, but nonetheless, Jesse Radstrom's dad came out and recruited us. You remember those little things, and I remember him at our house, and my mom's sales pitch to me was, I get to wear a lot of hats because I liked hats. That was no joke.
Oh boy.
That was kind of like how she got my agreement that we were going to up and leave Diamond Bar and move to the heart of LA in Hollywood.
And you signed a billion-year contract?
Signed a billion-year contract. I remember that quite clearly. Did it twice, actually, for some reason. We had to sign the official, just a piece of paper, and then we had this big event at the Palladium, Sea Org Day, I believe, and we signed a big poster that was released that time. The Sea Org contract was printed on a poster, and we all had to sign it. So I signed it twice.
Well, that's a good reason to join.
Hey, you can wear hats, man.
You're set for a billion years. You can wear a hell of a lot of hats in that time, right?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Okay, so then now you're in the Sea Org and you're 12 years old. What did you do then, Jackson?
I was part of the cadet organization. It's the Sea organization, or Scientology's version of the little-bodied kids would start off in the cadet organization. We were cadets, junior Sea Org members, and we would run projects and all that. I quickly became the one in charge of all the cadets, the commanding officer, the Sea Org terminology of it. I was the CO cadets for a while. And then I was recruited into the Commodore's Messenger organization out in LA. And I began doing the EPF for the States Project Force. Again, the basics, Sea Org basics and all that.
Okay, so that cadet org was actually in Los Angeles. You didn't go to the ranch or anything like that, right?
No, it was called the Apollo Training Academy. And it's across the street from where the Bridge Publications building is, over in the LA Pacific area is right now. And a lot of Sea Org kids who have spoken today have went through that like I did way back then.
Okay, so are you talking about Big Blue? Is that where you're talking about, that Big Blue building? Okay.
Yeah. And it's a compound, a mixture of buildings, and the Bridge Publications building.
Oh yeah, I remember it well. I remember that if you sent your e-meter in there for repairs, if you ever got it back, that was a very successful win. in those days. I'm not saying
in those days, yeah. And then everything was such a whirlwind. That was in 79, and by 1982, I was found to be qualified to move up go over the rainbows, as it was referred to back then. It wasn't referred to as ant or anything. It was referred to as over the rainbow.
Right. I remember that.
And, I was put through a series of security checking and clearances, which was out of my hands. It was just all I did was answer questions and provide information to someone's predetermined checklist to make sure that I met the qualifications to move up over the rainbow.
Okay. So how old were you then?
Gosh, you're asking me to do math. So let's see, 66. So I was like 14, let's see, 17, 60, 66 to 82. What's that?
16
66.
years, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I was about 15 years old when I went up to the ant base, when it went to gold over the rainbow.
Just for our listeners, like when you say you did clearances, what type of questions would they ask you for that?
Oh, very personal. It was all directed to dig into your personal, since you were born to that very moment, you're sitting on the clearance line and holding the cans and being checked for questions, see if you get a reaction out of all personal questions from if you were involved with the government, if you were there on secret mission from the government, to your personal sexual escapades, to who your friends were, anything and everything they would throw at you. If you were a pervert of some kind into animals, into whatever, just all these dreamed up questions that I had no reason to be asked. I mean, I was just a 15-year-old, but all I kept saying was no, because they were useless questions in my mind.
Yeah.
But they
By the
still.
way, when you say you held the cans, just for our listeners, the cans are these electrodes that are hooked up to an e-meter, and that's used. It's almost like you could say it would be like a lie detector. It's not that, but that would be the closest analogy I can give to it.
It's the church's version of the lie detector. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so once you get cleared through that, you're quickly hustled in a van, and you have no idea where you're going. Even the person driving can't tell you where you're going. So you just sit in the back of a windowless van. Back then it was a brown Ford Econoline. And literally there was no bench seats or nothing. We were just back there, me and about 4 other people. I don't even remember who it was, but amongst all the packages and communications that were going over the rainbow, we were part of.
Wow.
And showed up, I think, after midnight, and it was dark and mysterious and all that.
Wow. So then when you got there, what did you do, Gary?
I initially was brought there to be part of the crew that was building the Star of California, which is it exists there at the international base out in San Jacinto now, and it was built at the direction of L. Ron Hubbard to be a social offering to the local community, to build community relations and show that we got nothing to hide. We're not bad people, and come and enjoy this. Have your mixers, have your parties, have weddings or whatever at the Star of California. And initially it wasn't named that, but
yeah, and just for everybody's edification on this, the Star of California was a 3-masted sailing ship that was built on land, including a lifeboat that was on it, and then there was a cabin where you had the captain's cabin, and there was a little bar that was built in there. There's a kitchen in it.
Yeah.
We would have events for the public. I know, as being a member of the Golden Era Musicians, I played for many an event there, either internally enjoyed by the staff, which was not many times, but also for locals who would have maybe a fundraiser, and we'd invite people, and it was very unusual and very genuine looking.
Right. It was basically it was a clipper ship that was an existing building was built to replicate and look like a clipper ship that was docked at a Polynesian port.
Wow.
And that was the whole design, and anything and everything that could be made as real as possible, from those masts to all the roping and the lifeboat, the deck, the handrails, everything. They had, the gyroscope. compasses, and we had a big wheel, a ship's wheel, helm,
Yeah.
mounted there, and that you literally could wheel around. I mean, it was all, the whole idea was to have as close to being a clipper ship as without having a hull and being in water.
Yeah, it actually was very impressive. I
Yeah.
didn't know that you worked on that. And
Yeah, I did from day one with Freddie and Charlie. I mean, Charlie and Freddie and I, we worked on tearing apart, and you and I both know they were musicians,
yeah,
but for some reason they were assigned to go do that. And the three of us dismantled the baby pool that was once there, that is now the pond where the koi fish are with all the rocks that are up there. But yeah, that's what we started doing.
wow.
First day up there, yeah.
So you did that, and then what happened? I mean, once that was built, what did you do then?
Within a week, believe it or not, I was assigned to security watch 4 executives who had been removed from their executive positions and assigned physical labor. And I was assigned to watch them. Had no idea what I was doing, why I was doing it, other than they were in trouble, and I had to answer on their whereabouts at any given time.
Wow.
So I hung out with them and watched them.
Do you remember any of the names?
Oh yeah, John Nelson, Kerry Gleason, Kenny Lipton, and Paul Grady.
No kidding.
Yeah. And these are all adults that I'm having to watch. I basically became their runner. You know, when they needed smokes, they'd send me off to go get cigarettes.
Were you supposed to do that, or not?
No, but you know, you had that elderly respect that if they told you to do something, you did it. And I didn't know that. I didn't know.
You didn't know that you weren't supposed to do it, right?
And they knew that they would get away with it because they couldn't leave. Anyways, it was just it was eye-opening to me because they are quite comical people. Number one, I didn't see what was wrong with them. I knew Kenny Lipton from Los Angeles, and I knew Paul because when I met him earlier down in Los Angeles, went to his and his wife's wedding. So I already had some knowledge of basically who these people were. John Nelson was the commanding officer of the Commodore's Messenger Organization International, very high executives.
Yeah.
And here they are, you know, all tan, shorts, out there busting rocks, doing whatever our assignment was. So,
wow.
Yeah,
well,
it was an eye-opening experience to me.
You think you were picked for that particular duty because of your stature? Because as far as I know, you've always been a big guy. Like, how big were you then?
I was this skinny young kid back then. I hadn't really hit my growth spurt yet. And I think I was assigned it because my father was a police officer, so I had some ties to the law enforcement world.
Yeah.
And because of that, I supposedly had knowledge and already had the ability to perform security assignments and duties.
I got it.
I know that kind of helped me along into it just because of that. It was kind of weird, you know. If my dad was a chemist, I would have been assigned to the chemistry or something, you know. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe to the film lab.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I know because I do remember that distinctively, that because I had police connections in my background, that I was chosen to do that.
I got it. So now, were you actually in the security division of the org at that point?
No, there was no security established. No security force was established at that base at that time.
Okay, so that was just a special assignment.
That was a special assignment it was my introduction to people being watched. And that we looked after people who were in trouble. If you got in trouble, you're going to have somebody assigned to watch you. Because shortly after that, there was other people that got in trouble that I had to watch. Rick Azaran and Robin Wise and all these other people.
Now, why would you watch them? Just for our listening audience here. I mean, were they afraid that they would try to escape? Is that the main reason?
Well, back then I was informed that I was being assigned to watch them so they wouldn't take off and go run away. They needed to be around, and while they're doing their work, they needed to be watched. And I was kind of like the middleman between whoever their handler was. They would contact me or come see me to get a report on what they've been doing all day. And as a place in the middle that these guys knew if they took off, I would yell out, "Hey, John Nelson's taking off," or I can't find him. I would be like the announcer of that. So
Okay, and in those days, this is 82.
1982, summer of 82.
You didn't have those fences that they have now with the barbed
No,
wire.
we had a very small. Like originally, I do know that L. Ron Hubbard had no intention of having any fences up around that property. And then there was, prior to my being there in 82, the summer of 82, there was a big a theft occurred down at what was referred to as the where you used to live, actually, at the greenskeeper's house. It was a building on the south side in the middle of basically nowhere at the time, referred to as the greenskeeper's house because that's where the greenskeeper stayed. And the musicians had a little studio down there back there at the time, and hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment were stolen.
Wow. And just again, for our viewers, they had this facility where the international base was a resort. It was Gilman Hot Springs.
Gilman Hot Springs.
And the greenskeepers was a house, obviously, where the guy took care of the greens because there was a golf course there.
Yeah.
So you hear these different titles of buildings, like the maintenance man's house. That's what took place in the old days.
That's right. And the spa, where the spa was, they called it the spa.
Yeah.
And then they had these buildings that looked like villas, so they were called villas. And then
exactly. And the actual hot springs themselves dried up, or they failed to produce it. And somehow they jerry-rigged these springs, which was not really hot springs from underground. And the public found out about that. And I think that was one of the reasons that the place failed as a facility. Is that right?
No, here's the real story on why there's no longer hot springs at Gilman Hot Springs.
I'd like to hear that.
Up in North Mountain, the mountain that's on the back side of the property, it's called North Mountain. That's where the hot springs used to travel through. The local water district up Saboba Road towards the Indian reservation from the property, they drilled into the hillside and ruptured the vein of water. And that cut the water supply all the way to the west back towards Highway 60, all the way through the Badlands. That used to be all lush land until they severed the feeder line under Mother Earth that produced the hot springs.
Unbelievable.
I just
found that out for myself now.
Yeah, well, I looked up the entire history. I had great knowledge about the whole stagecoach lane that used to run through there, and all the old bottles. We used to find the old whiskey bottles and stuff from that. And I knew that place like the back of my hand, man. The history, wow. People involved, the Gilmans, the settlers up in Lambs Canyon, the Lambs family that moved up there. That's how Lambs Canyon got its name, was from the Lamb family.
Wow.
And, yeah. So, yeah, that's a whole different topic, but yeah.
Okay. So pretty interesting. No, you just educated me on that.
Yeah, that's how it all dried up. That's why it became a dry, dead valley out there.
All right. Well, that led to the failure of that place as a resort.
Yeah, they shut the hot springs down. They tried to continue it on as a resort, and people just fell up. I mean, there used to be a boxer there, Joe something, I forget, that used to train up at
Ron Norton trained there?
Yeah, Norton. That's right.
Ron Norton, the boxer.
Yeah, that's right. He used to go out there, and that was his main training facility, was up in the Del Sol building. Del Sol, which means something of the sun.
Yeah.
That he stayed in that building up in the second floor.
But they had that boxing ring still there, I think, when I got there in 1985, and then it was converted over. But
yeah,
an actual training. They used to in that building. You'd go there, and they edited film there for a while. I know that.
The editing building, that was the training facility for Norton.
That's okay, right. So let's get back to you and your so-called adventures in the Sea Organization. Now, you weren't in security at the time you were watching. You were just kind of an ad hoc, a special purpose person for people who had lost their posts or gotten into trouble.
That's correct.
Now, how did you get into security itself then?
Eventually I worked into the cine crew, the cinematography, the film crew branch of the church up there. And at the time, there was staff were used to be put on watch, where we would just patrol and be at fixed positions around the property, where we'd just oversee and look after the place for anybody wandering on within the perimeter, or just off the street. Um, we just, I don't even know how to define it. It was just somehow, some way, it was ordered that we had this system in place where staff would be assigned for hours in swaths of hours, like 4-hour shifts or 8-hour shifts.
Well, no, that's common in the military organization. I know when I was in the Marine Corps, and we had a base that didn't have a fence or anything, you'd stand watch, as they'd say.
Yeah, so it was
Go
very
on guard duty, and it was 4 hours on and 4 hours off. That's how we worked it.
right. And you'd come off your regular duty to, if you're a cook, you would come off cooking and go stand a post and then go back to cooking.
Yeah, I got it.
So we had that system in play, and then some security threat was presented, which I found out later, which was the Snow White program. Big threat was posed upon the base, and I eventually was used as the replacement for a lot of the cine crew, the chief cameraman or the chief grip or the set site in charge. I would be used in place of them going. So instead of me doing my own assign, I would do other people's watch, and I'd be there all the time, basically on security watch.
Okay, you better explain Snow White assignment.
Snow White was the name of this undercover program that was going on, run from OSA, the Office of Special Affairs, that was going on at the time. A lot of intelligence, and they were trying to basically protect L. Ron Hubbard and make clearance for get all the legal threats removed for L. Ron Hubbard.
Okay, so that was a program that was run by the church, right?
Yeah, that by the church. That's correct. So it was drawing a lot of attention, and people were finding out more and more that this is where the international headquarters were, and thus more attention was being brought to it. Media would show up and stuff like that. So they decided, they being Marty Rathbun and Dave Miscavige and the church attorneys decided we should establish our own security force.
I got it.
Where we were uniformed, and that was our full-time job.
So it was because of that, Snow White.
That's right.
By little steps prior to that, eventually ended up in the security force.
And it was the establishment of the Sioux organization having a security force.
And what year was that, Jackson?
Late 82 into early 83.
I got it.
And I was part of the initial security officers. Well, there was 2 guards, Kenny Siebold and Matt Pesh, and also Jim Cupp. They were the original 3 guards. And then the actual force was established.
And who all was in it in those days? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. Geez. Well, Kenny Siebold, Matt Pesh, who really wasn't there that long, Jim Cupp, Mark Locke was there, Ron Cook was brought in, Kenny Kampelman, on and off. Yeah, I mean, there was a guy by the name of Manny Cuesta, Will Thorne, yeah, a number of guys.
Okay, all right. Interesting. And what was your duties there? What rank did you have, or what was your assignment?
I was just a security officer. I was. We had 3 watches. We had 3 watches of five guards or 6 guards apiece. So we had like 20 security officers that we held 8-hour shifts. And we had Bonneview, we had Beulah, we had Broadway. There were 3, the main booth, and then the rover. Yeah. So there was 5 guys per watch. So there was 5 guys.
Okay. Now, when you say Bonneview, let's explain that to the viewer.
Okay. Now, again, we're coming up all this terminology. Uniquely at that base, every location or building had its own unique name based off of some sort of history. In this case, Bonneview was named, it was part of the old Gilman terminology, because that house had existed already, and it was named Bonneview. Why it got exactly Bonneview, I don't know. I do know Beulah, the Beulah booth, which was further to the northwest end of the property, was named after Suzette Hubbard's dog named Beulah, because it overlooked Suzette's house. And that's how Beulah got its name.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah, I kind of like the name, but to find that out later was based off of Suzette's dog named Beulah.
That's a bit unique. But
Yeah,
Bonneview, wasn't that a house that was reserved for L. Ron Hubbard?
yeah. Now Bonneville was L. Ron Hubbard's personal residence at that location. It was a full-size single-family house, probably about 1,800 square feet. And it had a laundry facility, detached building that was solely set up to take care of all of his personal clothing, where people were up there hand washing it all the time. And then it had a caretaker house where Paco Suarez stayed, and he was L. Ron Hubbard's personal caretaker, and he cleaned the house at all times.
Right.
That's all he did.
I
And
remember Paco, and I'll tell you, he was very, very particular as to how he cleaned.
oh yeah,
He'd dust a wall with a cloth and he'd rub it. I mean, you think he's going to wear the goddamn wall out. He'd
yeah.
rub it over it so many times, but that he felt it was necessary to keep things spick and
Yeah. Paco was very dedicated to his job. I mean, he took a lot of pride in it. He hailed from the original Apollo days, where he was a flamenco dancer.
Yeah.
Flamenco dancer, I believe, and he also partook in the local Ramona pageant outdoor play, historical outdoor play in the Hemet San Jacinto Valley.
Oh yeah. Oh, he was a hell of a dancer. He
oversaw the flamingo aspect of that play for years, all the way until his death.
Okay, so now you're in security. Who was the security? Who was the head of the security in those days?
Kenny Siebold. Yeah, that's another guy. Kenny Siebold was the head of security.
Yeah.
Paul Kellerhouse was also there. He was a deputy security chief. Kenny Siebold ran security for years, from '82 up until 1990, when I was assigned as security chief, and Kenny was removed.
Well, why was he removed? I'm curious about that, because he was I thought he was a pretty tough guy and a pretty fair guy too.
And he was a good guy, I got to say. He was kind of like that person in a position that you would forever know him to be, that person in that position.
Yeah.
It would be strange to see him doing anything else other than that. I mean, that was his forte.
Yeah.
And, he was removed ultimately because of his failure to properly respond to the flood that we had at the property back in August of 1990, I think it was 90 or 91.
Yeah.
Where the base experienced a 100-year flood, as the weather experts call it. It's an event that happens once every 100 years. Yeah. We received enough rainfall in a short period of time that equaled the total of what would occur in 100 years. So something like that. Anyways, there was debriefs that were done as to what happened during that event and why people didn't respond and start calling people for help and get bodies assigned to start preventing flooding from occurring to the buildings.
Right.
And it was discovered that I was out running around trying to gather people, and Kenny was my boss, was not responding and turning around and taking my reports, demanding that we get people down here, and then not getting the word forwarded. And he got in trouble because of that, and that really pissed Dave off. Yeah. And had him taken off of the security chief, and I was promptly put on.
Okay, when you say it pissed Dave off, you're talking about David Miscavige.
David Miscavige, yeah. Yeah. Any reference from here on out, unless I clearly say some other name, Dave.
Okay.
It would be Dave Miscavige, yes.
Good. Okay. And I notice I keep on calling you either Gary or Jackson. So
I think people are catching on to that now.
Yeah. Okay. You're the same guy. You don't change.
I'm the same idiot.
Okay. So now you're security chief. And
yeah,
I know this, that the various things that happen with security, with like, well, you're going to tell us some of them, but they're a bit unique and I would say pretty severe for somebody or something that calls itself a church.
Yes.
Go into some of these things. Like and we've talked about this on other times on the phone about that sniper rifle. Give me a little story on that.
Okay. Yeah. The lore that exists about the sniper rifle. Okay. This what the viewing public that are most likely listening right now have heard about the sniper rifle or the eagle's nest being located up on a mountainside all came about because of a misunderstanding of what really happened. And that was one of my security guards at the time, named Kevin Poston, on a Sunday morning was up at the Eagle booth, about to get ready to end his shift. He was going to get replaced at 8 o'clock in the morning by the next guard coming on. Kevin's up there on the hill and cleaning up his thing, and he had to relieve himself. So he hiked up above, it was on the front face of a hill, and just a little hike further up, you can go over the crest on a little plateau. And he went up there to go relieve himself. And at that time of the day, there's a temperature change occurring in the San Jacinto Valley, which is where you have this thermal layer, which you have the meeting of the warm and cool air as the earth warms up. Well, he was up at an elevation where it was about almost 80 degrees with a 20-mile-an-hour wind. Where down below, it was still in the upper 50s and lower 60s, still early morning dew. So he was in an environment that was primed for good fire conditions. Now, Kevin, in an effort to dispose of any evidence, I'm just politely explaining him basically up there taking a deuce and getting rid of the toilet paper. He decided to light it.
Whoa.
The lighter. And being in that environment where it's prime fire conditions, it took into the weeds right away. And we have this mid-slope vegetation fire starting on the hill. Almost 8 o'clock in the morning, which was very unusual. But he set the hill on fire innocently. He tried to feverishly put it out, and all he ended up doing was fanning it, and the winds took it the rest of the way. And next thing I know, I get a call on the radio. Now, because of that event, led to Kevin Poston being interrogated quite severely by a religious technology center staff member. Pulled him in, put him on the e-meter with electrodes to interrogate him as to what caused him to do this.
Yeah.
Evil drive he would have that brought him to do this. It was all trying to be manipulated into basically him trying to take out the international headquarters, and it basically going after Dave.
Wow.
That was the whole effort, to find out from Kevin Poston what can utter out of his mouth the answer to the questions why he would do such an act. So he was interrogated for hours from that afternoon into the early evening. I never saw him, and because he was being interrogated that long. And next thing I know, he comes out, and the answer is that he was trying to kill Dave Miscavige.
Jesus Christ. I mean,
that came about because Kevin stated, digging around, and anybody else listening to this right now, they know when you're getting interrogated, you get exhausted of what else is there? What else is there? Why did you kick the dog? Because I didn't like the dog. Okay. Why didn't you like the dog? And you're digging around for these answers. Well, I just didn't like the dog. That should be the answer. Well, no, they wanted a very specific reason as to why you didn't like the dog.
Yeah.
So that led into, what were you doing up at the booth that you shouldn't have been doing? And then so Kevin's thinking around, and he goes, well, I was following Dave around, and we had a spotting scope up there that was so good that you could read license plates off of vehicles from up there, from almost anywhere on the property. It was a really good, powerful telescopic lens that allowed us to do that. Okay, that's a spotting scope, not attached to a gun, not attached to anything. The only gun that I had up there was a 12 gauge with buckshot to protect my guards against the mountain lions.
Yeah.
It's a separate story that we actually had a mountain lion snipping his head inside the booth with the guard there one day. Anyways, so I put
wake up call, huh?
Yeah, I put a 12 gauge shotgun up there to have my guards be able to protect themselves. So that was the only gun that would ever, up until my departure, that would ever exist up at Eagle. So this spotting scope story of Kevin looking around the property, as a security guard does and would do, he found Dave in it, and he would follow Dave around the property. That was translated into Kevin having Dave put in the spotting scope and was trying to shoot him from up there.
What? Meanwhile, there's no gun attached to this.
There's no gun.
Okay.
There never was a gun. Now this sniper rifle we did have. was purchased through a series of events that initially we possessed 2 H&K 91 assault rifles, Heckler and Koch 91. They were the 308 rounds, semi-automatic rifles.
Yeah.
We had 2 of them, and they both had bipods. The laws changed on the type of firearms you could possess back in the late 80s, and I had those sold to 2 gentlemen in Texas, and we took the money from that, and our PI, his name was John Gaw, or JJ as we called it, but his name was John Gaw from Moreno Valley. He advised us what type of, and gave us direction on what type of rifle to buy, because the order then became, we need to have a rifle that would allow us to be able to sit up in the hills and pick off adversaries from one location. So that serious order was seriously applied, and John Gaw gave direction on the type of gun, the type of scope to have on it, and the type of ammunition that you want.
I got it.
And down to the type of ammunition that you didn't just buy bulk ammunition. We bought premium ammunition, which is, anybody in the gun world would know that if you want the best ammunition, you buy it of the same batch. It's like paint.
Yeah.
If you buy paint in October in red and try to buy it in September, they're going to be 2 different colors. Well, in this case of ammunition, that same theory applies. You buy it from the same batch.
So that you know how effective it is.
So you know there's not, it reduces the chances of that round failing when the time comes to use it. So we paid the extra money to have premium rounds in the gun.
I got it.
And I used to have to cycle them through. We always had 50 rounds of premium 308 cartridges available for use in that gun. So then I'd have to expend them. I had to shoot them, and then we go out and buy new stuff.
You say you'd have to expend them, I mean, because there's a certain life expectancy?
I think it was 6 months is what John advised, is that we cycle the ammunition out to guarantee it being able to perform when we want it to perform.
I got it.
So we specifically had that gun for that reason. And I had that thing locked up in a booth up by the upper villa with only access by myself. One person in RTC, or Religious Technology, and Dave's organization had access to it. And I had one other guard. There was only 3 of us that had direct access to that. And I had it under lock and key and under security monitored system.
I got it.
So it never went anywhere else, and no one else was ever trusted to be able to use that.
Okay, so that was not a rifle that was up at Eagle.
Nope, never was.
Okay.
Never. So yeah, there's never a sniper rifle up there. I seriously would doubt that there ever would have been, but it wouldn't surprise me with how crazy things got at that property. But that would just be an assumption.
Okay, so they did change over years. I mean, I know when I was first there, it was one way, and then it slowly, in little increments, got worse and worse. And if you had Dr. Jekyll running it, and then Mr. Hyde. It went that way. But let's stay with another thing I think is interesting to hear about, and that you had a button in the boot, and that could destroy any sensitive information. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that button was referred to as a data dump button, and that was basically indicated button that if we pushed it in the booth, it would indicate up in our computer headquarters, our main computer room up in the villas, that contained all the hard drives and all the data, electronic data about Scientology from what we refer to as nowadays as the online access to all the books and the green on white and red on white policies, to all the internal communication, which at that time was which would otherwise be referred to now as email, but it was our electronic communication back then, through all branches of the church, from LA to anybody up on the INT base to EU, and it was all set up through these microwave links and all that. So when I hit that button, if that button were to be hit in any 24-hour period in Incom, they didn't have to make a phone call and question what was going on. Their instructions would, if that went off, they would start dumping all the data and erasing all the hard drives, because we're under a raid. The base is being raided.
I got it.
So that was installed for that reason, that if we knew we were being raided, I would hit that button, or the guard in the booth would hit that button, and the computer division would start dumping all the data and erasing all of the hard drives.
Wow. And then just like, I know that in the beginning when I was there, you could send a letter out to anybody. It was a friend, a relative, or a business. But then it got to the point where every letter I sent out had to be checked by security. How the hell did that come about?
That came about when the security force was established in '82. Myself, Kenny, Siebold, and all that. With that became the secure of all communications in and out of the property, from the phone lines to written communication, and how all written communication was delivered off the base. Our own internal mail lines were put under tight scrutiny, monitored, and controlled. So a program was instituted to where all mail, incoming and outgoing, would be routed through security. And all these drop boxes would be established. We had one down in the main dining area. You may remember that, the mailbox.
Oh, yeah.
By the notice board, we had one there. And my guard would go to these points and collect all this mail. And he'd sit up in a booth and he'd sit there, and everybody was instructed to not seal them. And so he didn't have to seal them on the outgoing. On the incoming mail, he would open them,
yeah,
and read what was in it. And if there was no effort, subversive expressed interest to the property, or subversive efforts, or upset, or I don't like Scientology, the incoming mail, we were looking for people who were upset about their not hearing from the family members. And say it was a letter to you from, your daughter.
Yeah.
And you would never know about it. I would get it and see, oh, Ronnie's daughter's upset. I would then route it to our internal human resources department, for lack of a better term. And then the human resources would contact you and have you sit down and go, hey, we got this letter. That'd be the first you would know that your daughter even wrote you.
Yeah, I know that.
Went through someone else's fingers. So we did that for years, and up until the time I left. The mail was always inspected.
It was up until the time I left in 2012.
So I left in '97. He left in 12. So it carried on.
It carried on, and I'll tell you, that's the other thing was controlling people's movement. I know. Excuse me, I got to get a drink here.
Yeah.
We didn't always live right on the base. We lived in apartments off the base. And sometimes there would be people on a list, and you would be ferried home or back and forth with these buses. And if your name got on that list, you couldn't leave the base.
Right.
And, I remember security guards coming on a bus and reading off names of people who had to stay, and they'd get them off the bus. And
right.
I mean, that's a hell of a way to live, Jackson.
I was being held responsible to make sure people like you, if you were in trouble, would not leave the base. So if you left the base, you would get me in trouble.
And I'd get you in trouble because I was a potential threat of escaping, right?
That's the way you were viewed, as a potential threat. Thus, that's why you were put on the list, and thus I had to monitor you.
Well, okay. I guess you get so used to this when you're living there, you kind of justify it in your mind as that's the way it should be, because you're continually being indoctrinated into the fact that what we're doing is the most important thing that anybody could do.
Right.
To get this information about the technology of Scientology out to the public of the world, and it would be a better place to live in. So you think all of these ways of keeping you under control were necessary so you could do your job better. And in your own mind, it was justified. You've trained yourself into accepting this,
You, Ronnie, that's your view as one of the runaround staff members.
Yeah.
From my perspective, I had that same view, but mine was, I was the guardian of your situation not being allowed to leave the perimeter of the property.
Yeah.
Where it was my job to see to it that you basically existed, were kept there by whatever means necessary,
Mm.
literally, until you got through whatever handling that was designed for you to go through to where you could be trusted again.
And that was justified in your mind, wasn't it?
That's right. That I was doing it for your benefit, you see?
That's
Your
unusual. But
spiritual benefit.
okay, now let's talk about when a person blows. And I know that when they blow, you get them back for their benefit.
That's right.
Quite frankly, it's bullshit. We both know that now.
Beyond.
I know. But by the way, blow would mean you left without authorization.
That's right. A departure without proper authorization.
Yeah, in the Marine Corps, they'd say you went AWOL, away without official leave,
Correct.
if you deserted that service. But there, with the Scientology organization, if you left and you didn't have authority to leave, that was called a blow.
That's
And
correct.
as a matter of fact, there was even a drill that was developed called the blow drill. And
Yes.
as a matter of fact, I heard that you actually put this thing together. Is that true?
Sadly enough, Ronnie, it was myself that developed the technical steps.
Listen, I am not trying to make you guilty because look, I used to do videos promoting the lectures. I would recruit people to come into the Sea organization. I was a Kool-Aid drinking staff member.
Yeah.
So you got to forgive yourself for being taken in, because I'll tell you this, it is very clever the way this works, but that's another story. I don't want to get into it. Let's talk about the blow drill and how that came about. Give us some details on this, because I think this is really interesting.
Well, the term blow drill came about at the time the base that flood happened.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s, where everything became every procedure became a standard, identified as a standard thing. So whether how to cook a proper hamburger,
Yeah,
became the hamburger cooking drill. Okay, so
yeah.
you defrost it, you warm up the pan, and then you cook it at a certain temperature. That is an unwavering standard that was established. So to take that same concept, what's the procedures we go through to find somebody? Well, I had already at that time probably chased down probably a good over 200 people, been involved in one form or another, tracking down, finding somebody and recovering them and bringing them back to the base, easily more than 200 times.
For their own good, right?
For their own good.
Right.
And to save my own ass, because if I didn't get them back, it was a survival drive at the same time. Okay.
That's true. Yeah.
It was. So I had finally gotten to that point where everything was this whole drill thing, and I was running these drills on the base staff, and that just became my forte. And anything that needed a solution, I would generate a drill for it. So what do we do? So I had documented what it took, what we did, how we went about doing it into this form. I had to submit it to RTC for approval, Religious Technology Center, before it could be established as this is the drill. We don't do anything other than what's written here. So that included
steps, though. Give us some of the steps.
Well, initially, I had to establish a database on everybody. So I had these files that I would create on anybody, whether they're in trouble or not. Anybody who was on that base, except for Dave and a few key executives. I had a file on that included all of their personal information, their mother and father's names, their previous addresses, their if they had bank accounts, all their bank account information. If they had credit cards, all their credit card information. And I would casually collect all the details associated with every aspects of those, such as the credit cards. I had to figure out what their passwords were, or I just had to collect all that information somehow, some way. So I would make effort to collect all that and then compile these files. So if Joe Smith left, I'd just go through my file cabinet, pull it out. Here's the information, start sending people this way, that way. Okay, from the Bay Area, his parents are at this address. We checked 6 months ago. That's where they're at. Let's get someone on that house. So get two people in a car or get them on a plane and get them out that way.
Well, also, I remember one of the things would happen. I was part of it. You would send certain people to a bus station that was nearby.
Yeah, that was a given. We'd start Yeah, I even had the radio frequencies to the local cab companies. We'd listen to on the scanner for pickups around where where the staff lived off the property, and then see where they're going to.
Didn't you have people checking out the bus stations, the
Bus
airport?
stations, yeah, and that was all based off the person themselves. I'll give you an example of how extreme it got. We know one guy, Bill Dindu, is an example. He took off once. We knew as the days went on that we couldn't find him. We'd get deeper and deeper and thought of like, well, what is this guy like doing? Well, he's a big Giants fan. We found him in a Giants game or a 49ers game up in the Bay Area because that's the motivation we had to come up with a solution to the problem at hand. How are we going to find Bill Dindu? You would dig that deep into the thought process and the effort of figuring out, putting the dots together through the information I have in front of me about him. Is, well, he's a Dodger. If it was me, you would find me at a Dodger game in LA, because we even knew psychologically, Ronnie, that they're out seeking forms of relief and stress relief. So they're going to go do stuff like that. They wouldn't go hit a bar.
Yeah.
Like we knew one guy liked gambling, Chris Silcock. We found him at a one-armed bandit. All of his fingers were black from all the thousands of coins, all the money that he had. He just went to Vegas and started gambling on a one-armed bandit, sat there for days.
Wow.
So much so all the finger dirt off the coins went onto his fingers. He had black fingers. It's weird when you recognize that, but that's how we figured out how to find people, was what their likings were. What did they like to do? Who their favorite aunt or uncle was. They would probably go to their dad's side or their mom's side. Now, that's how I found people.
This, I'll tell you, the bad thing about this is you're telling the truth.
Yeah.
That's the bad thing about it. Could you imagine
Ronnie,
another church doing this? Like the Catholic Church or maybe the Mormons, having a blow drill if somebody says, you know what, I'm done. Well, it's true. In the Catholic Church, you'd be excommunicated, which means you can't receive the sacraments.
right.
You'd still be able to talk to your family. But along with this, with the blowing or leaving unauthorizedly, your family's disconnected from you. But I want you to tell us about Annie Tidman. Now, Annie Tidman, just for our viewers, Annie Tidman and Annie Broker and her husband, Pat, were with L. Ron Hubbard right until he died.
Till his death, yes.
So Annie Tidman was considered to be a sensitive particle.
Highly sensitive.
That's right. She got married to Jim Logan. And Jim Logan, I think he blew or else he was offloaded. I think he was offloaded.
He eventually was offloaded, yes.
Right. So now Annie blows. Tell us the story. What happened to recruit her, to get her back?
Okay. Annie was an exclusive, sensitive target. So the less people that knew that she left, the better in Dave's eyes. That I came to understand over a series of these things happening, that there is these certain levels of importance applied to the people. And that would result in which way we go down the blow drill. But Annie, in this case, she took off. I was not necessarily hands-on. I was kind of accessorily go out to her berthing and go see what you can find where she lived. Her berthing is a short, military reference to people's lodging. Go through her office. I did stuff like that, but I also knew that there was another bigger game at play, and I was in touch with Marty Rathbun and Mike Sutter at the time. And then I found out from them that they were going to be flying out. Greg Wilhair and Marty were going to be flying out to the East Coast. I think it ended up being Boston, if I remember correctly, to an airport out there.
How did they fly out? What facility did they use?
Okay, now that's the other thing is this blow drill, this church's concern for this loose cannon Annie Broker, they would use their other connections, such as through celebrity connections. John Travolta and Tom Cruise had airplanes with pilots available to him at any given time. Dave, his ultimate, and it's just something that I witnessed, can't say this to be a fact, but I witnessed, is that he would have these ties to people that would basically his ultimate purpose was to have access to their resources And in John Travolta's case, he had access to a pilot and a plane right away. Normally, it would take a couple hours delay of hopping on a plane and getting somewhere. Well, in Annie's case, it would be great if we could have had an airplane at the property back at the base, because we could have flown out ourselves. But the next best thing is John Travolta. So use John Travolta's plane to put Greg Wilhere and Marty on and fly them out to Boston to get there to meet Annie by the time she gets on the ground. And sure enough, they caught her at the airport.
They actually met her at the airport.
Yeah, she was on her way to reconnect with the love of her life, Jim Logan. They were madly in love.
Yeah.
And he had already left. He was already offloaded, so he was already up in Canada. She was on her way to him. And they both knew that they were going to be followed. So they're trying to do this secretly and not touch the hot, obvious lines of using credit cards and talking on the cell phone, because they knew they could be traced. They were doing this secretly to the best of their knowledge ability. Yeah. But yet the church, we always had the knack to be able to go around all that and figuring them out. And we knew where Annie was. And that's how they got there and caught her and brought her back.
And they actually accosted her at the airport. Physically, I'm sure
I wasn't there, Ronnie.
He wasn't screaming or anything, but I guess he acceded to their demands.
In terms of physical contact, it's all about mental and spiritual. You can verbally entrap somebody as much as it would be as significant as physically holding them down. You figure out the right words and you tell it to somebody, you plant that seed in their head, and you've got them.
Yeah, and I could just imagine Annie thinking, okay, here's these two executives. I can't make a scene because it would bring disgrace on the church.
And L. Ron Hubbard, yeah.
L. Ron Hubbard, and she worked with L. Ron Hubbard basically her whole life as a young person. And I could just see her saying, okay, well, they got me.
That's right. It's all talk and pure bullshit.
Well, it is how people are at that base for 20 and 30 years because they're trapped by their own minds. As a matter of fact, my book, Ruthless Scientology, My Son David Miscavige and Me, I tell how this happens. If you understand how a person builds their own mental prison. But Gary, listen, I really appreciate you coming on, and it's just been wonderful talking to you. And I'll tell you something. I know Jackson for all the time I was in the C organization. He's one of the greatest guys I've ever met, and you're a very decent person, and I appreciate you taking the time to.
Well, thanks, Ron. That means a lot, man. It's,
hey,
this whole thing's still hard to swallow, but I laugh myself at least once a day and try to make two other people laugh. That's my theory.
That's fabulous, buddy. Hey, listen. So I'm Ron Miscavige. This is Life After Scientology. I will see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.